Okay.
So, you know, we got started doing these Staved bead boxes because back a couple years ago when we started doing the bead boxes, everybody wanted to do them, but yet nobody was doing them. And we, Doug and I and a lot of other people, Ernie Conover, which is the fellow that taught me to turn my initial fundamentals, and he's also been a mentor to me over the years. All these people were like, well, what's going on? Why aren't they making them? And it really, we think it boiled down to the fact that you got to get a pretty good sized chunk of wood to hollow out for a bead box. And it's almost impossible to buy a kiln dried piece of wood that's big enough. A lot of people don't know how to glue them up if they were using multiple pieces like Jim did for his handout or his show and tell. And then you got to know how to hollow. And so we just kept scratching our head, and we came up with this idea of doing the stave boxes. And the idea actually came from Charlie Funtas, who's a club member, and I see him. He's actually right above my head on my screen right now. He did a demo on segmented turning, and in his materials that he handed out was some statistics and sizes for staves. And that's where the idea really came from. So it's kind of a form of segmented turning. Ernie Conover got involved in this. Ernie Conover is like super safety. If you can't do it safe, don't do it, kind of thing. And I started talking to him about doing staves, and he said, well, that's a great way to go. He said, the only thing is, he said, I'd be really worried about having something spinning in front of me that's just glued together on a small edge, and the whole piece is dependent on those glue joints. So if you had a weak glue joint, or you got a horrific catch and it tore the joint open, next thing you know, you got a lot of pieces of wood flying at you. And so that led us to doing the staves with a, let's try that camera, with a miter lock, so that the pieces go together and are physically bound together as well as glued. Plus the miter adds more glue surface. And so that's why I do, and I make the staves for the boxes that you folks want to use, if you want to use the staves, that are done with a 22.5-degree miter lock router bit. And so that's the reason for it. And what I want to do is I want to show some boxes. I got to go back to me. So this is one of the very first boxes I turned. I kept it, I held it back. I didn't give it to the hospital. And it's a stave. It's made out of pine. The base has a nice little knot in it. But the reason I want to show this is there's two lid styles, and this one I call the inner lid because once you put it on, it doesn't extend past the box. And that's also going to be the box that we're going to make today. This is another one that's pretty early for me. And this one I refer to as the outer because the lid extends out beyond it. So what's the difference? The difference is I have to turn the lid totally separate from the box, where the inner one that I just showed, I can turn the lid all at the same time, and that's why I'm going to show that today. It's just a design difference. Doesn't make a whole lot of difference which way you want to go. And then we started making, I don't know, does that show? That show's pretty good. We started making boxes, which we all loved, because they were nice wood and nice finish. But then the realization came that we're making these for young people and their families. And so I started asking the box makers to do some enhancing, some ornamentating. And this one's made by Nicholas Briggs up there in Grand Rapids. And he did a nice job. He's got a couple superheroes that he has put on with pyrography. This one I don't really know, but I think the other one is Wonder Woman. There's one that somebody's painted up. I thought this was done by Todd Beck down here in Kalamazoo, but it's not signed on the bottom, so I really can't give him credit for it because I'm unsure. Which brings me to the point that, when you make these, sign them, take some pride, put your name on it. I actually have a little slogan that I put on the bottom of mine. In terms of slogans and messages that you want to put on, because these are going to kids that are going through cancer treatments and all. I would recommend, and it's your own personal preference, but I would recommend staying away from religious thoughts, just because you don't know what religious background this is going to go to, and you don't want to offend anybody. But carrying notes, my friend down in San Antonio, when he makes a box, he actually drops his business card inside so that whoever gets the box, they know who made it. And he said he's actually had contact from some of the patients thanking him for the boxes. This one was made by one of our club members here in Kalamazoo. Her name's Barb Buck. And it's a pine box. It would be pretty plain, but yet she did some pyrography, and she made this really wonderful little carved cheese board with a hunk of cheese on top of it so that the mouse didn't get too hungry. I just thought it was kind of cute. Rick Havens turned this one in just before the COVID situation came upon us. And these are my staves, and he's made a totally different kind of base than what I make, and also the lid. But one of the things I wanted to point out is he's enhanced this. These are just stickers that he's applied to it. They're nicely put on, and it brings a little interest to a young person that maybe likes sports. So that's something that I thought I would show. What I want to do, Doug came down, we were going to do this demo live back in April, I think. And Doug came down and he did a photo. Hey, yes, sir. Go for it.
Yeah, I've got a question about those the bead boxes and COVID. Has that put a bit of a stymie on making those right now, or delivering those, or are you just collecting at this point?
It's put a huge stymie on delivering them. The people that I work with at Bronson Hospital are not accepting anything right now. So they're at the point now where the patients know they're going to eventually get a bead box, but there's no more boxes to give them. And I even talked to them about cleaning the boxes up, sterilizing, so to speak, and packaging them and sending them and shipping them in. And they didn't even want to do that. So they're staying away from receiving anything donated. And, you know, there's thousands of people that donate to these hospitals, things like knitted blankets, you know, for kids that are cold. And it's just amazing how much stuff gets donated to the hospitals, and they're not accepting anything right now. So what I'm doing is I'm just collecting them. I've got a bunch of them packed up, and the day they say it's okay to bring them in, I'm going to take them down so they're ready to go, knowing that they're building up quite a demand for these boxes, because they're some of the children have got boxes that they're putting beads into, and some of the newer patient children haven't got them yet, but they know that the other patients have gotten these boxes, and so they're all waiting for them. Does that answer your question?
Bruce, so the demand is still
for
there
the most-
even though we're not able to deliver.
Correct. Very correct.
Yes.
So
keep making them.
Keep making them. Oh yeah, Charlie, you're right on. Keep making them. I mean, I'm collecting them at my house. And in fact, my family room is quite decorated by a lot of them, which I think is kind of neat. But as soon as they give us an okay, we're going to take them in. This video that Doug did is about making the staves. We're not going to get into a huge conversation about it, but it's worth you seeing. I got it. I can run this equipment. So what we're doing here is we've taken the boards and ripped them into stave widths, and now I'm running them through a planer to get them down to the size that the router bits can work with. The router bits are only handle up to 7/8 of an inch thickness of wood, and a lot of the wood comes in as rough sawn, which means it's like an inch and an eighth. And so you just have to make multiple passes to run the boards through the router, or I'm sorry, through the planer to get them down to thickness. And since this video started right in the middle for some reason, we're going to kind of back up once we get through it. These are the router bits that I use. They're made by Fraud, F-R-U-D, I think it's spelled. They're made to be run in a router on a router table. I use them on my shaper, which the shaper is just a big router table that's overgrown in horsepower and everything else. But one of the reasons that I use these bits cost me around $80 a set. If I was actually using shaper cutters, the cutters for wood that's thicker than 7/8, the cheap ones sell for about $650 a set, and they go up from there. So I use the router bits. And one of the reasons is you really can't sharpen them. Once you start sharpening these bits, it changes the profile. In the, right here, I got the mouse running over it. This profile will change as you sharpen it. And I was doing it for a while, and I started noticing that the staves, when I put them together, had little gaps around the spline. the actual lock piece. And that was why, because sharpening them changes that profile.
But Bruce, you were running hundreds of feet of boards, weren't you?
I've run a lot of hundreds, yeah. A lot of wood's gone across this shaper making staves.
Have you used the same bits the whole time? Have they lasted, or do you have to replace them?
I'm on my third set. They last quite a while. So here's, I'm running a board across the router bit right now by hand. This is the same way you would have done it on a router table. I stopped this action because I wanted to show I use a power feeder which gets my hands away from the spinning pieces and also produces a more consistent profile on the board. But right here is where the wood is going across the router bit, and you can see that the wood's a little thicker on one side than it is on the other, and that's because the bit has shaved away a little bit of the wood visible. That's what it looks like if you were to stick your head over. And that's the power feeder running the wood through. And so there's the board after it's gone through one side of the profiling. Now on these, it's a two-sided situation, so there's two bits to the set. Whereas if I was doing a 45-degree lock miter, I could use one bit to make both edges. This one actually requires two. Okay, here we go. So this is the wood where it comes in, and I'm just measuring it to see how thick it is. See, it's like 1 1/16, which is too thick for the shaper bits. And then what I'm doing right here is I'm measuring the width of the board, because these boards come in all different widths. And I'm trying to figure how wide a stave I can make to get the best use of the wood without a lot of waste, and still be able to produce boxes that are in the basic size, which is like a 6x6, so 6 inches in diameter and 5 to 6 inches in depth. So that's what I'm doing here. And when I rip these boards down to the thickness or the width for the staves, I'll actually end up with several groups. One group might be 2.5 inches wide. Another group might be 2 3/8 inches wide. I've even gone down to about 2 inches, which makes a rather small box, but just trying to get as much use as we can from the wood.
So what's the ideal width, Bruce? 2.5?
I use 2.5 for the staves, yeah. That gives us that 6-inch diameter. So I'm bending.
Truss has a question.
Yes, sir, go for it.
Larry's question is, are all power feeders that large?
Maybe not. That particular power feeder is a professional model. It's what they call a 4-wheel power feeder, and they do make some 3-wheel ones that are a little shorter and also a little more narrow. And then some other makers have smaller power feeders than that, but that's a Powermatic piece of equipment. So what I'm doing here is I'm getting ready to run the boards before I rip the staves out across the joiner. And the reason for going across the joiner is it does two things. It makes the small edge of the board perpendicular to the large edge. So I'm squaring up the board, but I'm also flattening out. A lot of the rough sawn lumber comes in. It's got little whoop-de-doos in it that if I used it just the way it was, it wouldn't produce a stave that would actually go together well. So in flat woodworking, especially if you're using rough sawn lumber, this is almost the very first step with any of the wood to prep it to go to the saw or whatever the next movement's going to be. So I've done that. And now I've set my rip guide and I'm starting to rip the staves into size. And this is where we started, where I'm taking the boards and I'm running through the planer to get them thinner so that they'll work on the router bits. So that's the prep process for the staves. And then the next thing is to take them to the chop saw and cut them to length. And again, I'll vary the length based on how much wood I have. You know, these are roughly 6 inches. Sometimes I can go 6.5, 7, or sometimes I got to go shorter. I think the shortest I do is 5. And then let me switch the cameras here. This is what they look like when we're done prepping them. You got the spline on one side and then the mating piece on the other side, and they just go together like that. One of the lovely things about using the lock miter is when you go to glue this up, that physical lock keeps the pieces from sliding apart. If you've ever glued up like a picture frame with mitered corners, you know how much those want to slide around on that nice slippery wet glue. And the lock takes care of that, and I'll show you that in a minute. But
Bruce,
the next step, yeah, go for it.
Bruce, you're actually milling the wood square, and the router bit is actually introducing the appropriate angle, correct?
Absolutely. So when this went into the shaper, it was square, and the shaper cut the miter and also the lock spline and mating piece.
Well, they're doing it one pass, Bruce?
I want 2 passes, 1 for each side. So this is cut by one of the router bits, and then I have to change the router bit to produce this side. So it's a set of 2.
And that produces an 8-sided vessel, right?
Yes.
You have, because you could get different degrees to make like a 6-sided, a hexagon.
They don't make a lot. They don't make a lot of lock miter router bits. Pretty much all you can find is 45 degree, which gives you a 4-sided piece. So that would be a box. And the 22.5 degree, which gives you the 8-sided piece that we can turn into a round.
Yeah. I see they posted in the chat. They did post a link to Freud Tools to get that lock bit. So if anybody's interested.
Good. And there's lots of other manufacturers that make those bits, and some are less money, some are more money. I just try to stay with the Freud because I feel their products are priced right, and they're really well built and they last a long time. All my saw blades are Freud, and most of my router bits are Freud. Bosch is another fine manufacturer of router bits. So when you start getting ready to glue these up, the first thing you have to do, and I want to get this, I don't know how well that shows. Let's try this side. I don't know if you can see little fuzzies on the edges of this. There's some right along this top side. There's also some right in here. I don't know how well that's showing. Doug, tell me how it's showing up.
I can see. Yeah, I can see the cut edges, the little shavings, pieces, fuzzy edge.
So what you need to do is you've got to sand those fuzzies off, because if the fuzzies get in there, they get in between the two parts of the lock miter, they'll actually hold the joint apart a little bit. And that shows up in your final turning, as well as it also gives you a weaker glue joint. So what I do, I use a sponge to, it's a sponge sander. And I just take and stroke those areas and get those fuzzies off. Doesn't really matter so much along this edge, but along the lock and along, see now there's, this was cut with a bit that was starting to get dull, and it's left, sorry about that, it's left some fuzzies along the spline itself. And so I just take and stroke those off. Only takes a minute. And I go through all the staves doing each one. Then I'll talk about the glue in a minute. But then I take a paintbrush and I start painting glue on. And this is not like fine furniture. Squeeze out is actually, in my opinion, is a good thing, because it means you had enough glue in the joint to fill it. So I really slop on a lot of glue, and the excess, the squeeze out and all, is going to get turned away when we put it on the lathe, so I don't worry about it at all. So I'll paint this up with the glue, and on my workbench, not on my lathe, unfortunately I have to show it on the lathe, I just stick it on a piece of wide tape, and I bring the next one in and physically put them together. And I just go through that whole process of slopping glue on and then sticking them down. And I'll show you why I'm doing this. If anybody's ever made a box before, they know this trick. I didn't figure that you really needed to watch me paint glue on all of these. One of the things when I deal with glue, I seem to get it all over me. So I've pressed these onto that tape, and then all I have to do is take and roll this up and put it together. Bring the tape around that last joint, and there's my basic box with all its glue running out of it. I'm going to stick me down in the corner there. And then I take and put a band, and these are just, I think they call them worm clamps. They use them for heating and air conditioning and hoses on cars, and you can get them all kinds of sizes. I buy these at Lowe's in a package of 6 for about $12. And so I just put this clamp on. And what I do is I position the worm right at a corner. And the reason for that is as this clamp tightens up, if I was on a flat, I don't have enough room to use my impact driver. And it brings it tight just like that. Nothing slips. Turn it over, put another one on the other side, same thing. Put it at a corner joint, tighten it up. And I let it sit for 24 hours. So the glue I use is this Tight Bond translucent. Tight Bond's got lots of great glue. They'll all work. But what I found is most of the Tight Bond line of glues, when it dries, it's somewhat brown. The Tight Bond 3, which I use a lot for exterior projects, gets quite dark brown. And this translucent stays pretty clear when it dries, and therefore it makes it harder to see the glue joint once you've turned the box. And I just leave the masking tape on. Eventually it comes off when I start turning the box. So that's how I do the glue up. And these are the clamps that I get. Is that upside down or right side up for you guys?
Everything's upside down.
Sorry about that, Jane.
Somebody's been
There you go.
Yeah, somebody's already got a couple of check marks for things you've posted upside down.
Oh, no. Does that mean I don't get the certificate?
You get the certificate. You've already made mistakes.
So that's the clamps. And again, this is the glue, so you can see it right side up. And these clamps, I don't know, I've done lots and lots of boxes. I teach staved bead box workshops, and we've used these clamps quite a few times. And they last pretty good. The only thing is, if you're using an impact driver like I'm doing, you can't overdrive the worm and rip the clamp up. You'll just give me a second to get some organizing done here. Is there any questions yet?
Nope. Not that I see.
So let me try the side view. Let's give some nice detail. This is kind of what it looks like. There's little knobs of glue on here. And down the side, you can see where the squeeze out has left lumps of glue. I just don't worry about them. This is not like making fine furniture. That kind of squeeze out, if you were making furniture, is a disaster. But in this process, it's fine. So the first thing you need to do is flatten the edges of the blank. From now on, I'm going to call this a blank and not a box. And the way I do that, and I will talk about the cold jaws in several different formats, so just bear with me for a little bit. This cold jaw is actually made by the Easy Tool people, and they call it the Easy Chuck. And one of the reasons I have Easy Chucks that I like a lot because it's really easy to change the jaws. and they make these long pins that seem to hold these blanks quite well.
So I have a question about the Easy Chucks.
Go for it.
When you change those jaws, do you feel they go in as accurately as the jaws like on a regular, like a Bitmark, where you have to screw them on?
Yes.
They fit in there accurately every time.
They lock down accurately, just like a Bitmark, or I use Stronghold chucks a lot, and they're the same thing. You got to screw the jaws on. So if you're doing turning where you need a lot of different jaw sizes, you could actually get away with having one chuck and the different size jaws and change them out rapidly. It literally takes about 30 seconds to change from one set of jaws to another. And I can display that once we get done with this. I will tell you that my friend Ernie Conover won't use the easy chucks because he's concerned that the latching mechanism is could fail, and that would let the jaw loose. I don't know. I've used them for quite a few years, and I've never had any trouble. So the first thing.
I have a question. Ron Campbell, don't you have an issue with those? Are you still in the room, Ron? Ron, are you in the room? Did we lose Ron?
Yeah, he didn't want to learn how to make a bead box. It's too easy.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure that this edge and the other edge are totally flat. That's the first step. And it's a pretty easy thing to do. I just want to make sure I get that chuck tight. I'm talking, and my mind only has one track to run on. Yeah, I got it tight. I do want to say that these pins on the easy chuck, any of the chucks where you're using long pins like this, you can over tighten them and actually bend the shaft inside the gripper. So you have to be a little bit more conscious about how much force you're putting on the chuck when you lock them up.
Hey, Bruce.
Yes, sir.
Question. You obviously didn't face the side that's against the chucks now. Is that correct? Are you just kind of letting the pins do the aligning to the axis of the lathe?
The only thing that I did to align them is I made sure the blank got pushed up against the jaws solidly, and then tightened up on it. The fact that this is a wide piece, it's kind of hard to get it cocked in there if you just settle it against the face of the jaws. Does that answer?
Okay, so it may only have one or two points of contact on the surface of the jaw, but the pins are doing the aligning, correct?
Right. So this is not unlike the process I went through with the joiner and the planer in prepping the wood, in the sense of you're starting with something that I call raw, and you're milling it and perfecting it. And so you have to deal with that as a possibility. But what I'm going to show you will alleviate all the problems that any deviation in how this blank is locked up can be taken care of. So now we get to do what all us turners like to do, and that is make some dust and some chips. And I started out fairly slow. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to take a cut across the end of the box to flatten it out. You're cutting air when you first start because of the points of the box. So it's a scraping cut. Once you get a shoulder that you can put the bevel on, you can open the gouge up. By the way, I'm using a bowl gouge, and it has the David Ellsworth grind on it to do that. Now I know I'm not good enough to actually get a perfectly flat cut on there. I know Doug and some of you other experienced turners can do that. That's not bad. You put the top camera on. It's really not bad. I'm proud of myself. That should negate some of those mistakes I've made so far. But what I do is I started out just using a board, and because I make enough boxes that I needed a tool, I made something that's a little easier to hang on to. But if you take a board with sandpaper and put it across and sand, it will perfectly flatten that edge. It's impossible to have an angle on your wood any way, shape, or form because the board is all the way across the piece and it self-flattens. So I turn the speed down. And it will dance around a little bit. Now you see I got some marks right there that I want to get rid of. That's where I made my entry cut. There we go. And I just take and turn this piece around. What I try to do, let's see, where are we? Right here. If you look at the point of the box, I try to get those points into the center of the groove between the jaws. What that does is that gets these pins almost in center, depending on the size of the piece you're turning. But with these 6-inch boxes, it almost gets the pins perfectly in center of each stave. We're going to do the same thing. I'll give you a down view on this one. So what I try to do a scraping cut for my entry cut is I'll line the bevel up in the direction I want to go, which should be parallel to the surface, the end surface. And I flatten it out like I was going to do a scrape. I get up close, and then I roll the tool open. And the reason for that process of starting out in a scraping mode, and then as you start penetrating the wood, rolling it open, what you've done is you've taken a very small scrape and gotten a surface for the bevel of the tool to be on, and then you can open it up and let the gouge do its job. But the benefit of that is if I tried to come in this way, there's a good chance that if I'm not perfectly straight with the bevel, that the gouge is going to take a screw action and go across the surface some. And so by rolling into the cut, that does away with most of that chance.
You probably want a really light cut on that too, so you don't like
Yeah.
that right
Yeah,
out.
I'm taking as light a cut as I need. Some of the boxes I've glued up have been really bad, and so then I've got to take a deep cut. And the other thing is, if it's pretty good, you don't have to cut with a gouge. You could just take your sandpaper and flatten it out. The problem that I find is that those little nodules of glue will plug the sandpaper up really fast.
See, I've used the scraper to do that in piece.
And that's a good point, Doug. You can use a lot of different tools. I'm just showing the way I do it. A lot of it has to do with what are you comfortable with. So at this point, we're ready to start the hollowing process. I'm trying to look at my notes to see if I've covered everything I want to there.
How about if we didn't have cold jaws? How would you get this far?
Well, Doug, let me do this first hollowing, and then I'm going to go into all that.
Okay.
But since I've got this mounted, I'd like to do that process. So like this is a robust comfort rest, steady, or tool rest, and it's too big for me to get in the right position so that I can cut on center with my tool and clear the bottom. So it's dragging right there. And so that means what I got to do is just kind of put the corner in. Whoop, I'm still hitting. Just put the corner in like that. And the problem with doing that is I don't have a lot of support. My tool's going to start hanging out over the rest a long ways, and it's going to produce a lot of chatter and a not very good cut. I am going to go ahead and do that on one cut just so you can see what I'm talking about, and then I'll show you some other ways. Now I'm going to use a detail gouge, and I'm using it as a scraper, whereas I'm using the wing as a scraper, and I'm doing a pull cut. I would not recommend pushing the tool in. And you really can't ride the bevel, whether you're using a bowl gouge or a detail gouge or whatever. You really can't ride the bevel because you would be doing quite an intermediate or interrupted cut, and it would be difficult to control the cut. So the reason I say I'm using a detail gouge because a lot of people don't know that you can hollow with one. Another tool that really works quite well is a scraper here, and I'll do that in a minute. So we got a pretty good, that's a little better, pretty good view. I got to kind of stay out of my way here so I can show you what's going on. So I take the tool in, and I want to just present this edge, this wing to the wood, and I'm only going in half wet. So I actually hollow these in a two-step process. I'll do half of it, and then later on I'll do the other half, and I'll show you why.
Hey,
So that's a pretty good example of the noise rate you're going to get.
You
And
move. Hey,
go ahead.
slide your camera to your left a little bit. Get the camera more to the left. We couldn't. Your hand was in the way. It was.
I'm sorry.
You move that
To the left. So
Yeah,
you want to go that
no,
way.
Other way. Yeah. Yeah. Get the. No, the other way. You had it. Yeah. Get it over that way. That way we can see beyond your hand. Yeah, like that. There you go. Now we'll be.
All right. So let me change over here because I don't really like doing it that way.
And I see Fred posted that the AZ little hogger works great to rough out one of those also. Which
All right, that's I'm glad you did that because I've not tried the little hogger. This is a tool rest. Let me see if I can give you a better view. Probably me. This is a tool rest that's manufactured by Robust. It's called a box rest. I don't know if the price is still the same, but they were $55 when I bought it. And I bought it to do in these bead boxes, but I end up using this a lot, and I'll show you why. It's designed to go in inside your box like that, and you can literally bring your tool right on around and go across the face if you want to. I don't do that, but that's what that design is for. But the idea of it is it gives you very solid tool support deep inside of your box. So I'm switching over. I got to move my tail rest that's in the way. I'm switching over, and I'm going to use an inside bowl scraper. This happens to be a Glenn Lucas negative rake. And I sharpen these at a 25-degree angle, so I have a 50-degree inclusive angle right at the point. Stuart Batty says negative rake is productive and safe as long as that inclusive angle stays at 60 or below. So I'm using a 50-degree. But as you can see, the whole scraper is supported by the tool rest. So if you got an extra $55 that you want to spend, it's a great investment. Otherwise, you have to deal with sliding your tool rest down in and getting the best support you can get. So I don't want to waste away too much wood. So what I'm trying to do is get down to the point where the glue in the joint disappears, and that's where I stop. A little bit more. I don't know if you were cognizant of it or not, but you can go by the sound to know when you've gotten round.
The robust tool rest is still selling for $55.
Is it? That's great. I mean, it's a marvelous tool. I use, or a rest. I use it a lot.
Well, I see you've turned that about halfway in. Are you
On.
concerned with the inside edge being parallel, that you're not at an angle there? You know what I
Here,
mean?
you talking about, Doug?
Oh,
Or along?
inside, are you concerned that you might be thinner towards the very, you're at the bottom here, that the edge of the box might be thinner at the bottom than towards the middle where you've stopped cutting? Are you worried about that being parallel, perpendicular?
I'm really not. There's two things that are going on. I mean, it's the inside of a bead box. So, unfortunately, the production person in me says, keep in mind what the end use of this is. And so I'm not terribly concerned about it, but I'm also using the tool rest, because this is the tool rest that I use, and visually eyeing the gap. And unfortunately, I can't show you that gap. But I eye that as a guide to know whether I'm parallel with the outside or not. then the trick becomes because you're going to put a tenon, it's like any other box, you're going to put a base on, or this is like making a lid for a box, except it's going to be the base. You want this edge to be not on a bias. And so I use a tool like this square and slide it in there, and I did pretty good at getting that straight, so I'm happy with that. If I didn't, I'd have to go back in and just work on it some more and try to get it squared up, because if the inside of the box is on a bias, when you go to fit your tenon for the base in there, you start having trouble. You either got to cut the tenon on the same bias, or if you got a square tenon, you're going to end up with a gap someplace. Excuse me, the dust is getting to me. I'm used to turning with a powered respirator helmet. So I'm not used to the dust. In fact, I'm going to turn up my filter fan now. And since this is the bottom of the box, I take advantage of the fact that the bottom's open and I sand it so that I don't have to try to sand deep inside the box when I'm finishing it. And this is my go-to tool for sanding inside the box. It's a piece of, I think, 1¼ PVC pipe with some rubber pipe insulation taped onto it to give a little softness to it. And then I wrap some sandpaper around it, because I'm not the kind of guy that's going to take a piece of sandpaper on my hand and put my hand in there. It just makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up when I even think about doing that.
Yeah, I find when sanding the bottom of those, I can get in there with my angle drill, get that bottom 2 inches.
Oh, can you?
Yeah.
Oh.
In there with a 2-inch mandrel on there.
That's good enough for what I'm doing today. So now the next step would be to make the base, but I want to take a few minutes and talk about some alternate ways to mount these blanks when you don't have cold jaws or you don't have long pins for your cold jaws. And this is one of the questions that has come up time and time again. Doug, to answer your question about the jaws, these, all you got to do is stick a pin in here and push, and that releases the latch.
Oh.
Comes off. So that's what the back of it looks like. And the latch actually catches, see if I can get the right angle for you. There's a lip in this depression right there. And that's what this catches into to hold the jaw on.
Are those numbered?
No, they aren't.
That's a nice.
Yeah, you can just pile them up. So that's how easy it is to change over. So if I only had one chuck, the next thing I was going to do is make my base. I would need some regular dovetail jaws. I can just pop these off, pop the jaws on, and I'm ready to go. So what I have here is a waist block with a faceplate on it, or a faceplate with a waist block on it, no matter how you want to think about it. I have used this before, mostly for demo, I think, for either the Grand Rapids Club or the Kalamazoo Club. And so what I want to do is I want to make a tenon that'll fit the inside of the box, just as it is. So this is an alternate way to hold these, and I know some of the fellows in Grand Rapids have done this to make their boxes. And my tenon's just a little large for this one, so we'll turn it down. Now I'm going to do the same cut that I did previously. Where I'm going to take the tool, I'm going to start out making a scraping cut, and then I'm going to, let's see, let's get top. Where are we? On over, babe. There we go. So I'm going to start out making a scraping cut, and then I'm going to roll the tool open as soon as I get an edge there for the bevel of the tool to ride on, and at that point it will be a scrape or a push cut from that point on. Excuse me. Still a little big. Getting really close to it. Now I'm going to use a flat scraper that I have sharpened to be a negative rake. Go. And this is okay if it's a little loose. You know, what the tenon is there for is a lock, so the piece can't fly off laterally, and it also centers it up. So at this point, what you want to do is make sure you have a nice flat, And if you're looking down on it, you can see I've got a gap in here. You don't want that gap, which means I'm not flat right at the shoulder. So I'm using a box scraper so that I can have the side cut. There we go. So at this point, you could glue this drive plate, waste block drive plate on to the bottom of the box. And once that's cured, that would be your drive or your coal jaw replacement. So that's one way to go. And I know a couple of the fellows up in Grand Rapids have done this. Another thing you could do with the same drive I got to clear the deck here, so bear with me a second. Too much stuff out. There any questions so far? If, ands, buts, likes, dislikes?
Yeah, I don't know if I misunderstood. Do you say you're gluing that to the box?
Exactly. So what we're talking about here is, you know, I get the question every time I do this demo someplace. I get the question, well, I don't have cold jaws. How can I turn that box and do the hollowing? And so what I'm doing is I'm showing 1, 2, 3. I got 4 different ways you can drive this box without cold jaws. Well, 3 without, 1 with cold jaws, but with just the regular buttons on it. So you make a tenon with a flat that'll match up to the flat of the box, and you glue it on. So at that point, now you could drive the box and do your hollowing.
Which
Okay?
your finger's at the bottom of it then, though. People don't, you didn't glue your bottom on, you glued on a waste block, right? So
Right.
Right.
This is not the bottom of the box. If this was the bottom of your box, that means you've got to hollow all the way to the bottom. And that's more challenging than just partially hollowing from each end. I mean, it can be done.
Yeah, got it.
Or you might have a hexagonal shape at the bottom of your bead box on the inside.
Yeah, and we've actually had some of the boxes come in from Grand Rapids where inside they were still hexagonal.
Which there's nothing.
And that's okay. All right, I got some room now.
So would you glue that waste block on there like with a lot of glue or just like
Yeah. Just slop it on. And then at some point, you're going to actually use a parting tool and part it off.
You need to turn off Mini-Me so we can see what you're doing there.
You'll get lonely though.
Oh, you will. We don't care.
Let's see, where can I show this better? So this is an adaptation I've made for one of my live centers. It's just a piece of 2x6 or whatever it was. And I drilled a hole in it and I threaded it so that I can put it on my live center. And I've also turned an angle on it to fit inside the boxes. And this is a really handy tool if you're going to do more than one box. It's handy even with one, but if you're doing multiples, it's really great. And so what I do with this is I just take and put that on in that format. I'm going to cut my head off a little bit in that format. And what that does is that holds that on for me. So when I glue up a box, this is the thing that I use to clamp the box on, either to this waste block or onto my base or whatever. So you could have glued that, put it together, and let it sit in your, well, in this case, an $8,000 clamp overnight or an hour or two. And it would be the same as if you'd taken a bunch of clamps and tried to lock it up. So the other way to go is to actually screw that on. That was your chance to have a pee break.
Oh, and I missed it.
Yeah. So what I do is I drill a pilot hole. Where are we? There we go. I drill a pilot hole in here. You can feel when you go through. I'm only going to do a couple screws for the sake of time. So I put 4 screws in. So 1, skip that one. Yeah. I'm using these Craig pocket hole screws, and the reason that I like to use these is the shank is quite small. The shank is quite small, and they're self-tapping. So when I drilled these holes, all I did is I went through the blank, the body of the box, the workpiece, to have space for the drill bit. And then I just run that screw in there. It doesn't have to be reeved down. What you're doing is you're just putting a locking device in so that you can turn the box.
This isn't if you didn't want to drill it. I mean, if you didn't want to glue it.
If you didn't want to glue it, right. So what do you do about the holes when you're ready to take it off of here? You could put more holes in and glue beads in. One of the fellows actually did this from Grand Rapids, and he had a bigger, he must have used a bigger screw, and he was out further than what I am. And he affixed marbles in those holes. So you can use it as part of your enhancing. But I do that, or that's a recommendation. I don't do it because I've got all the other equipment. But now you can drive the box without a cold jaws. So that's two ways. Glue it on, screw it on.
If you screwed it on, you could reuse that block then for your next one.
Many times, yeah. Where the glue wouldn't work so good. Okay, so before I get to the cold jaws, go back to cold jaws. So this is called a donut chuck, and you make them to hold things that are just you can't hold any other way. Doc Green published a wonderful book, Fixtures and Chucks for Wood Turning. And the process to make a donut chuck is in this book, along with hundreds of other ways to mount and safely turn different pieces of wood. So if you don't have this in your library, I highly recommend it. But in this book is a complete instructions to make this. Now, I've never turned a bead box using a donut chuck, but I've made this because it's a fine example of how to hold that box and drive it so you can hollow it And you see I've cut it back far enough that I can hollow the wood out, bring it round inside, and still have clearance to the chuck itself. There's some real pros and cons to these donut chucks. One is these screws need to only be exposed at the headstock. You don't ever want to have anything protruding out on the operator side of the chuck, because you don't want to take a chance of becoming entangled or even just scraping your hands up bad by the screws flopping around. So that's a negative to it. Now I've left these long because when I made this chuck, I thought, well, I'll leave them long because I might want to use it someday for something. But if you were making one of these just strictly to turn bead boxes, then what I would do is I'd cut them off pretty short. But you still have this wing nut here that's rotating, so you have to be more cognizant of it. And I'll take one of these. Hopefully I can turn this. Yeah. See, now I've just let that screw protrude from the nut, and you don't even want to have something like that out there, because if you're one of these guys that uses gloves when you're turning, your glove could get caught, your shirt sleeve could get caught, a whole lot of things that could entangle you in the lathe. So that's really one of the downsides of using a donut chuck. But they're effective, they're very positive, and they're an excellent way to turn something that you can't get a hold of any other way. And in Doc Green's, go ahead, Doug.
I've done something similar to this. I can't remember now what it was, but where I had something protruding off the backside like that, and I put a piece of tape around that, like loosely, so the tape was just, and then that swings around, and if you get close to that while it's turning, that tape will hit you before the thread.
I do that with rubber bands on weird stuff.
Yeah, stick something on there that's flying around the outside, and it'll warn you when you're getting close. You're better off getting hit by a piece of masking tape than by the boat.
So this is last alternate mounting. So this is a standard cold jaw. This one's actually a one-way stronghold chuck with the stronghold, and they call this the Mega Max jaws. They don't call them cold jaws. And like most of the cold jaws, they come with a bumper or a gripper that's on a dovetail. It's on an angle. And Jim Pierce, this might be an answer to what you were dealing with. So you tighten up on these, and because of the configuration, that dovetail angle on the bumpers, you get contact, and it's human nature to start tightening these up. Now I want to get maybe that view will give me what I want. You start tightening these up, and what happens is the bottom edge of the bumper starts to swell because it's hitting the wood first. And so it starts swelling away from the chuck jaw. And when it does that, it takes your blank and moves it away from the jaw face. And you can't hold it back if you do that. So I don't know if you can see where that's swollen out there or not. Let's try the side view. Probably can't see it. But where they flatten on the wood, they swell away from the jaw, and they will literally push the work away from the flat of the jaw face. And if you had something like this Live Center, yeah, you can hold it back with that and get that back down on the face. But the problem is you want to hollow inside that bowl, and you can't have this in there. So there is a excellent way to deal with that. And I'm going to put that in there. Where are we? Let's go top. What I've done is I've measured how high these bumpers are. They're a ½ inch. And on this blank, I've put a line on every flat that's a ½ inch. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this blank, and I'm going to cut a dovetail into that will match up with the dovetail on these bumpers. So I'll do that now. You can use any of your gouges. I'm actually using a 40-40 grind on this bowl gouge to do this. And we want to go, where do we want to go? Side? Nah, top.
Top. Yeah.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to start right at that line and cut towards the bottom of the box. I've got enough lines on there that I can see that as that comes around. Now again, you got to remember, I'm cutting there, in the beginning. I'm rolling the tool open, and I'm just pushing it in the direction that the bubbles swing. And you want to just go in as deep as the flat. Now I went a little deeper. I've got a crease in there. It's not very deep at all. But all this will come out when you turn the outside of the box. This will all go away. And I'm actually going to go a little bit deeper. I want a little bit more bite. Better.
Just a note, Bruce. I do that. I do that, and I have a pair of jaws that are big enough on a chuck to grab that. So the same thing though.
Well, there's a lot of people that I know only have one chuck.
Yeah.
All right, so what I'm doing now is I'm tightening the cold jaws up with the standard bumpers, and that dovetail is fitting right inside of that dovetail that I just cut. And that box is on there. I could go a little tighter.
So Bruce, it looks like you're pushing the pads away from the center of the flat a little bit to get into a little bit more of your recess.
Well, the dynamics of the box and the jaws are not going to let me align these bumpers up into the deepest part of the cut. See, so these two could, that one might, yeah, I might be able to. Let's see. See if I can get that. Maybe my jaws wouldn't open far enough too. There we go. Yep, there we go. Good point. That was David, right?
Yes.
So that's locked in there, and the bumpers have actually pulled the blank up against the flat of the jaw. So it's solid. I would say that's almost safer in terms of turning than using the long bumpers. So that's an alternative if you have a set of cold jaws, but you don't have the long pins. Any questions?
Hey, Bruce, I've made some long pins with just longer bolts and using some hose material.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't have to buy them.
Yeah.
If you do want to buy them, where can you see the best? How about side again? There we go. The Easy Chuck has a set, which is what I was using on the cold jaws in the beginning. I don't remember the price, around 30 bucks. And Penn State Industries actually has two different sizes. One is an inch and a half long, and one is 2.5 inches long. And these will fit on Nova and Stronghold, whereas the Easy pins will only fit the Easy jaws because of the thread. These are metric, and the Easy jaws are SAE. So again, this is Penn State. These use an M6 1 screw, and this uses a 1/4 20. So there's a way to get them. You know, it's, I don't know, $30. Joe, I think you bought some of these when I did the demo before.
I did.
At the Grand Rapids Club. Is that about the right number? Is 29,
Yep.
$30?
Yep, I think they were $30.
So is there any other questions on alternate ways to mount that box?
No, good information though on the pins, Bruce. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I'm starting to run over here, so I'm hurrying a little bit. Might skip a few of the steps, but try to get them all in for you. The next thing to do is to make the base for the box. And what I'm doing is I'm using a Stronghold, their number 3 jaws, which measures just under 4 inches across, but I take a pair of calipers and get that measurement because I'm going to need that in a second. So for this maneuver, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the face of the jaws as my drive to turn the raw piece of wood that I'm going to use for my blank. And so what I did is I've cut this round on the bandsaw and mark center. I did that for cutting it. I have a circle cutter on my bandsaw, which makes it easy. So if I mark center, I can get a pretty good circle. And then I use the tailstock to do 2 things: apply pressure on the blank against the chuck for the drive, and also to hold the blank in center on the lathe as it's spinning. First thing is to bring it round. Same thing, I'm going to roll the tool into the cut. So I'm doing a scrape, and I'm rolling the tool up so that the gouge can do its work. I want to take a little deeper cut.
Can you get the top camera, Bruce? There you go.
Let's start over. I want a little deeper cut. My tool rest is in the way. I gotta change the tool rest. I want to get the bevel on the tool pointed in the direction I want to go. Trying to shave out some of my little grooves I made. There we go. Now I'm opening it up so I can cut. There we go. I still got a flat in there. green. Bring the rest around. You want the rest to be right at center to do this marking process. I'm going to use my calipers to mark the wood, and the way I do that is I let the left leg touch the wood, and the right leg is just for visual comparison. I don't let it touch the wood. If it touches the wood, it'll fling the calipers right at me. So is that a good view, maybe? Let's see. Go side.
Can you zoom out the other one? Or that one? Okay.
That side. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's good.
So my first thing is I'm just letting the leg put a scratch in there so I can see where I am. And I'm not quite where I want to be, so I got to move the leg out a little farther. There we go. I'll just press it in. And that's my limit for my tenons for the chuck that I'm going to use. Bring the tool rest back down.
Go back to your overhead. There we go.
Well, it's the same deal. I'm going to do a scraping cut first. And then I'm going to roll the tool into the wood. And that gives me that service for the bevel writing. That's the drawback of using the cut jaws. They don't have as much grip as something else might. This is a very old piece of poplar. It came out of a house that was built in 1862. So it's plenty dry. And it does have some unique cutting. So this is my dovetail tool that I ground myself so that I can make the proper dovetail for my cut. And what I do with it is the point does most of the cutting. So I'll start the point and slide it across. Dovetail right there. What's the company? Their slogan is simple and quick.
Modernistic, simple and quick.
Modernistic, that's it. Simple and quick.
Give me the words. I'll figure out the slogan. I'll figure out the
You guys watch TV too much. Doug, your little switcher's getting all covered up with chips.
Hopefully that'll be okay.
All right. Now what, huh? We're going back to that blank that we half hollowed. And I'm getting ready to make the tenon that's going to go inside of the box and become the base. So I want to do the same trick in terms of marking out how big that tenon should be. So let's see, let's try top. There we go. So what I've got is a set of calipers that I span across there. Oh, that'll work. So that I can mark the same way I did for the dovetail tenon or the chuck tenon.
Slide your tailstock back and use your side camera to show us this. There you go. Oh, we can see it. Okay.
Same thing, the left leg touches the wood, the right is just for a visual comparison. I'm going to go out further. Press it in a little bit, get a nice cut. Back to my Ellsworth gouge. Starting to do a scrape there, now I start to roll. Now what I'm doing is I'm locking the tool with my thumb so it can't back away. So I'm doing a scrape. I'm not taking a huge cut here. And then I start to roll the tool so that wing comes around and gives me a better scrape and also produces the shoulders for the bevel of the tool to ride on. I'm going up to that mark that I put in. I'm going to take one more cut because I want a little bit bigger tenon than I got. And I want to do a test fit. Unfortunately, it's big. If it was small, then that's a problem. Going back to my square negative break scraper. And then I'm going to put a little bit of an angle on the tenon. To help me get the final size and alignment. You see it just will cover that little bevel that I cut in there. So that tells me that all I got to do is match the smallness of the bevel. And I can tell when I'm up to full because I'm watching the size of the curl that's coming off. Come on. So that's a little tight. You want to leave some room for glue.
Bruce, turn that tool sideways a little bit so I can see the side. There you go. Okay. That's a little bit like a Bedan or.
Yeah, really, you could use a Bedan. But the problem with the Bedan is it's a cutting tool. And if you use it as a scraper, you dull the hell out of it. Whereas a negative rake scraper is literally built to be dulled. So I'm kind of funny about that. You know, Stuart Batty wanted us to bring our conventional ground skews. There we go. Wanted us to bring our conventional ground skews to the workshop because we were going to use them as scrapers. And I don't know about you guys, but I do a lot of work to get a nice sharp skew. And I didn't like the idea of using it for a scraper, so I actually took a negative rake scraper. So then the next step would be to sand this, which I'm not going to do. So you could take a light scraping cut across there, clean it up. This is rough sawn. Clean it up and sand it. And then you would glue that on. And again, you could use the you could use that cone that I had on the live center to clamp the piece on while I drew. But this will become your bottom. And one of the most important parts of this is that this surface needs to be flat. Let's go top. All right. So if I was to glue that box on right now, you can see I got a little bit of an airspace in there, which means this surface is coming in on an angle. That would not give me a real good glue joint. Plus, I would probably end up with a gap between the base and the body of the box. So I could refine that, but I'm not going to right now because we're already at almost to noon and we're not quite done. But that's the process. And then when you glue, you want to put a lot of glue on this surface and also a lot of glue on the mating surface. And you can put glue on the sides of the tenon. If you put glue inside the box, when you slide the box on there, the tenon's going to scrape that glue and push it to the inside of the box. And so you'll end up with a lot of squeeze out in the bottom of your box. So if you just put the glue on the tenon, on this surface, and the flat surface of the box, you'll get a nice glue up and you won't have all that glue to clean up in the bottom of your box when you're done. Questions? Oh, come on, I feel like I'm talking to myself. Are these working?
Yep, everything's working.
Okay. I wasn't getting any sound, so I thought maybe they died on me.
Nope, you were just doing such a good job explaining.
Oh, yeah, right.
We're in awe, Bruce.
What's
Yeah.
Bruce?
So through the magic of TV cooking, there's our glued up box with a base on it. And so the next step would be to hollow this, and I guess I better do it. I'm sorry, I'm running overtime. Zoom will probably charge us extra for the overtime. There's a lot of the guys that have made them. I know Steve's made some of these, and John Brennan has made some of these boxes. And I think they can attest to you that there's a lot of steps to it. They're fun projects, but there are a lot of steps. Everything all clear. One of the things with a negative rig scraper is you can go in and out. I wouldn't recommend it with a gouge. How do you like that sound?
A little more.
A little more. Who said that?
Doug did. I'm coaching you.
Good.
You have to be careful in that step not to hit the bottom, right?
Yeah, you should, but you'll scar the bottom. The bottom at this point would be sanded and ready for finish, so you wouldn't want to scar it. I need to check, make sure I'm kind of square. Now, the top's not as important as the bottom in terms of square. Yeah, that's pretty good. So I would sand that now, which I'm not going to do. You guys will just have to imagine you see me sanding it. And the next step is to make the lid. The way you can watch me struggling there. So for the lid, I'm gonna take my blank. This is a piece of 2-inch rough sawn tulip poplar. I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna use the chuck as my drive. I'm gonna put a tenon on one side, turn it around so that I can shape the inside of the lid. One of the things that's important about the lids is to try to keep them light because you have little children that are very sick handling these, and they can't always lift much weight. So if you got a real heavy lid, it makes it more of a challenge for them.
Whoops.
Oops. Let the left leg hit the wood. There we go. Same thing, scraping trap, roll into it. Now the wood that's going to be in the chuck tenon will eventually become part of the wood that's the knob.
Yep. Just a note to everybody who's hanging on in the meeting here. We do have some free giveaways that we'll be giving away at the end of this. So if you can, hang on out here until the end of this demo so we can hand out all of our free prizes.
Is it one of those box tool rests?
I'd put my back on the wheel if that was the case.
In terms of the length of the demo, it's probably about another 15 minutes. That works for everybody. So, where are we? So what I'm doing again, I'm measuring the inside of the box. So I know how big to make the tenon on the lid. Now what I do here, because I'm going to turn the lid on the box as the final step, I want the lid to be a tight fit. So I'm going to actually have to push it on so that helps drive the lid when I'm doing the turning. And then after I've got it all turned, I'll sand inside the box to loosen the lid up so the lid can rattle in the box and be easy to lift off. Same thing, I'm going to roll into it.
Hey, adjust your camera.
What camera you want? Oop.
Oh, adjust that one.
There we go. I'm going to roll into the cut. Open the tool up. I want a fairly long tenon on this one, so I also want a bevel on it to help the kid be able to slip the lid in. So I put a bevel, but it hasn't gone all the way to the shoulder of the lid. Oh, too tight. Cut that bevel again. There we go. Marvelous. I don't know, Doug, your switcher keeps getting covered up with chips.
Okay.
So at this point, I just simply turn the whole thing around. Get my tailstock support. Now, one of the things you have to keep in mind here is you've got grain orientation in two ways. In the box, it's in spindle fashion, so it's running the length of the lathe, but in the base and the lid, it's cross grain or faceplate work. So these areas you need to use bowl gouge. You can use bowl gouge on the spindle work, but you don't want to use a spindle tool on the faceplate wood. So I'm going to start out with a bowl gouge because I just want to bring these down more to the box size.
So Bruce, I do have a question. Do you have a handout with the steps involved that you can send to me that I can forward to everybody?
I have it partially put together. I got to finish it up and then I'll send it to you.
All right, we will get one out this week.
Yep. I'm going to roll into the cut.
Hey, top view camera, top camera.
I could use the bowl gouge to flatten the body of the box out, but I really prefer a roughing out gouge. because of time, I'm not going to spend a lot of time in shaping and sanding and all that, but I do want to show you how to form the lid. I also did not howl inside the lid, which I should have done, but I'm kind of pushing the time thing a little bit. So now I'm just going to shape the lid.
Bruce, are you hollowing the inside of the lid for aesthetics or to make it lighter?
Make it lighter. But it's a great opportunity to put some aesthetics in there. One of the things when you hollow the lid, you got to keep in mind where you hollowed as you're shaping the outside, or the next thing you know, you might have a, if it was a bowl, it'd be a funnel. One of the things I really like about the Ellsworth grinder is you can remove a lot of wood in a hurry. I'm cutting a lot of wood, but all that drive's coming from the friction tip between the lid and the box. Which is why I wanted a tight lid. This is a great opportunity right here to get a cut. You gotta watch the wings and the shrouds that they don't run into something you don't want them to run into and overfeed. So at this point, I go to my detail gouge. It's safe, even though it's a spindle tool, this is a safe operation because of the size of the piece at this point.
Bruce,
Go.
when you switch to the side camera, this top camera is like buffering really bad for some reason.
You know what?
It looks good on your end. Must be for some reason coming through Zoom. It's buffered really bad. Well, now it looks okay. Okay.
I switched out and came back into it. I don't know if that'll do it.
It's still bad.
What?
Go to the side view and let's watch that camera. Now do it. Okay.
I'm using a bowl gouge right now. And there's all kinds of designs for your knob. What I'm doing is I'm leaving a ridge in there. I will soften that with the sandpaper when I sand it. Which makes it easier for some small fingers to get underneath of that, and they have something to pull on when they don't have a lot of strength to actually squeeze. Okay. Now when you really get to test it. much driving friction you got. So to get rid of that dimple, I'm just going to kind of hollow this down. And what I'm doing is I'm making a soft start, so I'm on the bubble before I start to cut. Let's see if the top will work. So I get on the bubble, I pull the tool back, I stay on the bubble, but I pull the tool back to get it cutting. Then I open it up a little bit, follow the contour around. And at that point, I would finish that up with some sandpaper just to take the sharp edges off. Well, one of the things I like about doing a demo from home is I got all my tools. And then I would sand, besides sanding the lid, and sanding the outside of the box, it's ready for finish. And at that point, after I've done the sanding, I'll turn the box around back into my cold jaws and finish the bottom. And we're out of time.
All right.
Any questions?
Great job.
Awesome job, Bruce.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Fantastic job, Bruce.
Thanks, Bruce.
If there's enough fellows that want to do it, we could actually have a Zoom Bead Box workshop and deal with questions and whatever at a later date. Thank you, Doug.
All right. Thank you, Bruce. We really appreciate
Bruce.
it. Great job. All right. Let's do some.
Yeah.